record on this. Hello, and thanks for being here. This is Making Sense of It, and it's where we look at some of the concepts of reality therapy and choice theory and help the one that's not as familiar with the concepts of Dr. William Glasser, help you to see them in a way that's more understandable. So our speaker today is Wendall Walker, and he is going to be talking about
excuses.
Excuses. Thank you. All of a sudden, I couldn't see what the board said. So it's going to be talking about excuses. So welcome everyone, and Wendall, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hey, let's hear it for Wendall. Oh, I'm Wendall. All right, Megan, Dave, Rose, Mona. Megan, are you trying to say something to us?
No, go ahead.
All right, welcome. I got several objectives today. They're relatively simple. I want to invite thinking and discussion about the issue of excuses, especially vis-a-vis a choice theory explanation of human motivation and behavior. How do they relate to each other? How do they fit in? I want to go through a lot of examples of excuses. There's Megan. Megan, your hair color has changed since that photo. I want to see a lot of examples of excuses. Megan, where are you located?
Washington. That's what I was trying to say, and then I put y'all in my pocket and I heard, are you trying to say something? And then I shut it off.
Washington State or DC? State. Well, welcome. All right, so examples, a lot of examples of excuses, just to kind of get our thinking generated around that. I'd like to invite you all to take a few notes and think about how you might respond or have responded to people when they're giving a lot of excuses. Sometimes we have a large repertoire of organized behavior and responses, and we look for an opportunity to use them. Sometimes we create a new one right on the spot, especially if we're actively listening to people. So invite you to maybe jot down, hold your ideas about things you might say to people. And then I want to do an excuses, talk about an excuses activity that's wonderful for a training session, a seminar. It's fun. All right, so with that in mind, I've got a handout here that Mona has almost rewritten and to prepare it for proper presentation here. And I'm just going to start with this opening paragraph. Sometimes people give excuses and blame other people or circumstances when they have not behaved responsibly or as others expect them to, or within acceptable standards. And in this handout are some typical examples of behaviors which say, explicitly or implicitly, I'm not responsible for this situation. And of course, they indicate or based on an external control psychology way of thinking. Almost everything we do with choice theory, we're comparing it with the more dominant external control psychology mentality. So I'm going to kind of run through these, maybe not all of them, just to kind of get our brain thinking. I may comment on a few as I go, or I may do it later too, but here's some typical things. He made me mad. They were out to get me. Nobody told me. I better go left to right, Mona, so we can go down and forget about that. That's a stupid rule anyway. You know, well, you might be right. It might be stupid. But is it going to change in the next day or two? As long as you're in school, as long as you live in this community, as long as you're driving down that street. Not likely. So your dilemma, you got a stupid rule. There are penalties for not involved, adhering to it, and it's not likely to change. And the whole time I'm trying to do things here in Florida, we've got these old timey windows that crank like this. So they open up and then you crank them and they close down. So I picture myself for myself and others slowly cranking the window of personal responsibility. Choice theory is a psychology both of personal freedom and of personal responsibility. So I'm trying to crank in the walls of personal responsibility around the person in a caring way. Ohio and Florida, well, welcome. In a caring way so that the person would start thinking and maybe choose to move in a more responsible direction. And rather than making excuses, okay? Here's some more. I can't help it. That's just the way I am. Hey, well, we saw on television yesterday in a Senate hearing in the U.S. Nobody calls me names and gets away with it. That one representative, this is a U.S. senator from Oklahoma, and he got into it with a Teamster boss, and hey, and we're gonna call each other out. Hey, let's go at it right here. It happens that the Ohio senator was a former NMA fighter, the ones in the ring with no holds barred. Wow. So it's like, hey, you're saying that you can't do that. Wow. He's too old to change. I forgot. This job is driving me crazy. That's an easy one to deal with. Yeah. Well, tell me about how it is. Okay. I see. All right. And yet you keep coming into work. I don't understand why you keep coming into work where a job that's driving you crazy. Can you help me understand that too? My guess is that you figure it's better to be employed at a job that's driving you crazy than to be unemployed. Are you looking for other jobs? That sort of thing. You can quickly kind of address what they've got and then start moving elsewhere. I'm not trying to tell them what to do. I'm trying to facilitate their thinking and evaluation of their situation, what they really want. Gosh, choice theory is so magnificent. It's just appropriate everywhere. I don't drink any more than anybody else. Okay. I didn't feel like doing it. This weather depresses me. I think about several decades ago in the Midwest in the United States, the drought was going on forever, and the land was cracking open. Texas, there was a lot of that, and in Oklahoma we had it, and people were selling their farms, their farm equipment, and so if all of a sudden we had a rainstorm for days, people would have been saying, "Thank you, Jesus. Oh, this is wonderful." So it's not, well, of course, it's not the weather that depresses me. It's how I perceive it and how I manage it, what my skills are at the moment, what my situation is. I mean, the rain in that case would not be depressing the person. They'd be running outside, cheering and yelling, "Yay." But another time you say, "Oh, all this rain for days and days is making me depressed," and sort of thing. I didn't have time to do that, So I say, well, you're right. I mean, it's a lot of challenges on our time. There are 10,080 minutes in a week. How much time would it have taken? How much time do you need? Evidently, it's not that important to you. Is it that important? Lucy Billings is big on asking questions, and a lot of us are too. Is this really important? Maybe you didn't really want to do it in the first place and you agreed to it. And so it makes sense to me that if you weren't really committed to it, that you wouldn't follow through. So maybe let's talk about something else that might be more important, I'm just like that. I'm hot-tempered. Vietnam ruined my life. I was in the Air Force 24 years. I never was in harm's way. It's nice when people say thank you for your service. I mostly kind of think of those, and they say regularly, military people and their families putting their lives on the line and that sort of thing. And that's true for a lot of them. I never was in harm's way. The Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. has got 52,000 names of people that lost their life because they were in harm's way. Vietnam ruined my life. There are a lot of people decades later here now who are still struggling with alcoholism or drug addiction, and they got into that from their Vietnam experience. And I think I would empathize and say, well, I can't even imagine how terrible it was and how traumatic. And I'm just thinking of Senator John McCain, who was a POW for 6 or 7 years in Vietnam, Hanoi Hotel, and came out and became a U.S. Senator and was magnificent. I don't know. I wonder how he did that, because he has a good reason to say Vietnam ruined his life. I don't want to criticize or judge other people, but I also don't want to buy into a continuing series of excuses on things. He's got an attention deficit disorder. I heard that, and I don't know that much about this, but I heard Glasser say one time, we all have an attention deficit disorder to things that we have no interest in. Picture yourself at I'll call it a kind of a cocktail party or a thing, and people are standing around. There's little groups of 3s and 4s, and a person's in this group and the other 3 are talking about something, and this person's looking around because what they're talking about is of no interest to the person. And the person doesn't, quote, want to be rude, but they're not interested. And they say, oh, excuse me. Hi, honey. Maybe they set up a deal. Hey, listen, if you see me looking your way, come over and get me. Rescue me from the group. So is that an attention deficit disorder, or is it I'm not interested in what's going on and I make a choice? Sometimes we make a choice to continue being in that non-need satisfying environment. Sometimes we find a way to try to get out of it. I didn't think that it mattered. I didn't get old. I worked, I've told you all many times, I worked in race relations and affirmative actions and equal opportunity for a long time. I've heard this one 100 times in seminars that I did. My cousin didn't get hired for that plumbing job at Fort Rucker, Alabama, because he was white. And I usually kind of stop and see anybody else have a similar experience. And I'm trying to also think about what I want to say or bring it around. And it's possible that the person didn't get chosen because they were white, because there'd been discrimination against women and minorities for a century before. And the place was under a court order to hire as many qualified women and minorities. That's possible that a white male didn't get. I have my own thing about, hi, Alice, about these things. People who will fuss about affirmative actions and people getting preferential treatment, they don't fuss about a former veteran getting extra points on their score for a job opening. And you can make an argument for it. Person served. And so maybe this person is more qualified than this veteran who got hired. Is that equal opportunity? You can really, it's some good discussions. I didn't hear the bell. I can't leave. Oh, here's one on a woman who's in a relationship who's being mistreated physically, emotionally, psychologically. I can't leave him. Where would I go? This may be more of an outdated thing now, but there was a time when people saw no other options. They didn't know of a halfway house or a program. My alarm clock didn't go off. Well, maybe we need to Let's try it right now. Bring it in next time to our session, and let's set it and see if it'll go off. Maybe we need to get a new alarm clock. I didn't hear the bell. Maybe we need to do a hearing check. Is your hearing okay? I mean, I'm looking for ways. Sometimes I use humor to start trying to cut into. There are too many rules to remember. He's a slow learner. There's things that I'm a slow learner on too. That plug away. He was temporarily insane. What helped him get out of that situation? How did he, if he was temporarily insane at the time, but now he's sane? What do you think that helped him get out of that? I didn't have a choice. The traffic delayed me. She got so angry she lost control. Prison will make a criminal out of anybody. There are people that learn a lot of criminal behaviors in prison and become pretty good. There are also a lot of people, my friend Mona Duncan in Texas works with people as they transition out of prison into halfway houses and programs who put their lives in good order and are no longer, quote, operating in criminal. So there's some of both, They're making me repeat the 8th grade. Are you the only one that they picked on this? Did you do all the work that was needed to graduate? I mean, I'm trying to kind of, as we go along, just throw things off the top of my head that might start to invite the individual to rethink and question without criticizing them. I do want to have as an underpinning the connecting behaviors. Originally we called them the 7 deadly sins, and then the 7 caring habits. Pretty much now we're calling the connecting and disconnecting habits too. So I want to be mindful in this relationship when there are excuses being given of finding opportunities to support, to encourage, to listen, to accept people where they are. I don't have to accept behavior that's irresponsible or hurtful to other people, but I can, it's a nice phrase. Your behavior makes sense to me in the situation that you were in. You saw no other options. You know how to fight. You know how to yell at people. And so, you pulled out that from your repertoire behavior to try to get them off your back. And it worked temporarily. I'm just wondering if we could, but you also got suspended from school. I'm just wondering if you'd be interested in us talking about ways that you could handle that the next time it comes up without getting suspended or without getting into a fight or something like that. Would you be interested in that? Well, what would I do? I don't know. But we could talk about it. I don't want to start trying to tell them what to do. I want to invite them. They have ideas. Has it ever happened before when somebody did this and you didn't punch them out or whatever? Yeah. Well, what did you do in that situation? We start trying to bring things around, and I don't have to accept their behavior, but I like the idea of saying it makes sense to me. I understand it. I might throw in a little bit of truth and humor. I wouldn't be very good at punching people out or assaulting them when they call me names because I'm not that skilled at fighting. So I pretty much try to avoid that, but that's the behavior you've got. Maybe sometime you could show me some moves or some techniques for defending yourself. I don't want to assault other people, but I would like to be better prepared. And so I'm turning things around. I'm looking for strengths that they have, and that sort of thing. Let me move on to, thank you, Mona. At the bottom of this handout, I'll just read to you. From a choice theory reality therapy perspective. Let me move this over. These, these excuses would not be acceptable, but they would be understandable. One of the axioms of choice theory is that all behaviors are purposeful. Maybe it's the behavior was the best the person could come up with at the time in their physical, mental, psychological state at the moment. There are likely behaviors that people have worked before. Other people have let them get away with the excuses and not held them accountable. And they may even be getting people some of what they want now, but not likely all of them. By using excuses and blaming behaviors, people may be able to, I'll change it around and say, I may be able to. I'm in the process of trying to really minimize what would be excuses. Oh, be thinking about this, a difference between excuses and an explanation. We'll come back to that maybe, okay? By using excuses and blaming behaviors, people also may be able to avoid logical or natural consequences of irresponsible behavior, being fired from, suspended from school, fired from a job, sent to jail, getting a traffic ticket. They may be able to avoid loss of esteem. Well, it wasn't his fault because blah, 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 so-and-so happened. He told me that. Other people will pick up, especially sometimes mothers, they'll pick up, well, and they start making excuses for the kid. The kid no longer has to do it. He or she has delegated to the other person to be their excuse giver. But I may be able to avoid loss of esteem with other people. Coming on down here, Mona, a little bit. I may be able to avoid punishment, either criticism, verbal, emotional, physical abuse, or prison time or time out or kind of, what's the word, ostracism from a group, okay? Choice theory and reality therapy are the total opposite of this external control psychology perspective. They attempt to educate people that we're all internally motivated and then therefore responsible for almost all of our behaviors. And that we also have, we always have some kind of choices. And look, this is my own typing down. Oh no, I know what this is. See my name down here? I got it misspelled. But I do remember. Here's what the handout looks like. Let me put it up close. And at the bottom, I put a mailing sticker on there. You buy some, return address labels. Well, of course, it was my responsibility because I put it on the handout and it was misspelled. So you can change that ELL to an ALL. So it was either my responsibility if I didn't edit quite well enough or if I just missed it. So thank you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to describe an excuses activity, and then I'll wrap up, and then we can kind of blast in with conversation. I got this from Dr. Bob Wobbling, a master at 10,000 techniques and talking with people. And I call it an excuses activity. So I'm in a seminar teaching choice theory, and I bring up, say, we're going to talk about excuses now. And what I did originally to develop this handout here, I would say, I'd like to do this. Would you take a minute and write down typical excuses that you hear people giving for when they've not been responsible, not done what they were going to do, been on time or whatever. But I'd like you to write, and you could do it individually or as a small pair or trio. Write each excuse on a separate piece of paper. And I started bringing scratch paper that was ready to be recycled or thrown out. I started bringing that with me because people hate to take perfectly good paper, write one, and I said, it can't be a little bitty note thing like this. They didn't know the reason for that. I need a larger piece of paper, but one excuse per piece of paper. Okay. And then as I started giving them this other paper, it was okay. One person thing, and just as quickly as you can. And they write, and they write. And then I'd go around the group hearing excuses, and I would log them onto a tear sheet, a poster thing, okay? Here's a technique if you've not thought of it before. I don't want to say, okay, Alice, let's start with you. And you got any? Yeah, I got some. So Alice gives 7 excuses, and I write them all down. Then I go to Mona. Mona gives another 6. She said, well, I had a couple of the same ones Alice had, but I got these other 6. So after we go around 3 or 4 people, all the others that have done the thinking and the writing, they've got nothing new. We've got 17 listed on the sheet, and they've got nothing new. We've taken up all their stuff. So a good technique is to get one from this person and then go on around. That's kind of an aside as an instructor or facilitator technique. And then I would have these sheets of excuses, and I'd take them home with me. And then one day I sat down and got all of them and put together this handout. So that I didn't have to do the work anymore. I could have thought to myself. Then what we do with this activity, we hear all of them, and we have some laughs too. And you can do some ad-libbing there and what have you. And then say, okay, here's what we're going to do now. And I say, we're going to wad them all up, W-A-D. I don't know if wad them up is a universal, Alice, are you, does that communicate to you, wad them up?
Log them up?
W-A-D, wad them up. Look, well, watch.
Wad them up.
Yeah.
No.
It could be a
wad them up. What would I use instead? I'll think about it.
Crumple them up.
Crumple them up. Crumple.
Yeah. Now demonstrating people then, if they don't know the term wad them up, you see what you're doing. Crumple them up, ball them up, whatever. The reason I say that is because there are a lot of expressions that are geographically colloquial. And but anyway, you get the idea. I got them up like this, and I say, according to choice theory psychology, these excuses would be understandable, but not acceptable. And so, what we want to do is we start as I invite you to take on more and more of a choice theory internal locus of control perspective and give up more and more on the external. I invite you to try to get rid of as many of these excuses as we can. So people have got these, and the way I forget how Wendall did it, but anyway, then I would pick up a trash can in the room, and the first time or two, I think I set it on the table, and then I said, no cheating, don't get over here close, and so then people would, they would throw them. Here we go, like that, trying to get them in the trash can. Well, that was a fun activity, just doing that alone, And then one day I accidentally, I guess what I did was I didn't have a good place to put the trash can. So I did like this, held it up in front of me. What do you think happened and asked him to throw them? What do you think happened, baby? I got hit in the head. With excuses, and of course that was fun. You can have some fun with that too. That may not be your style or your shtick, but and they're different. You could think of 17 different variations of how you might want to do this. Okay, but we get rid of them, and then there's something to be said for activities that portray a getting rid of or a throwing out from in places that have foam bats that you beat on the hair or foam dummy, whatever, you know. It's like a catharsis of getting rid of too. And then another time I thought of, and I brought a roll of toilet tissue in and I passed it out and I asked him to write each excuse on a piece of toilet paper. And then after we got finished, we went into the restroom, the whole crowd, somebody checked to make sure nobody was in there. And we had to be careful. You don't want to overload. And we literally flushed these excuses down the toilet. And anyway, this is not the way to do it. I'm just saying with you to be thinking about if you're doing things with excuses, some different ways that you might get people to symbolically or physically kind of get rid of the excuses too. Let me, here's a wrap up here too. In general, I'm going to be looking for and trying to build my relationship with this other person. Stay with the connecting habits as much as possible. Actively listening, humor is not one of them, but showing compassion and caring and empathy, using questions to invite the person to start thinking differently about the scenario, looking to go for the wants. If our behavior is driven by the pictures in our quality world and what we want to satisfy these needs, I want to be talking to people about their wants and their needs, okay? I also want to model the behavior. There's a good expression here. Choice theory does more teaching than preaching. It's a nice phrase too. I got one last little story and then we'll open up conversation. I'm in Montgomery, Alabama, doing a training called Dealing with Difficult People at an Air Force base. And I had stayed across town in a motel because I knew where that was, and then drove across the other side to the place. There was something, I can't remember now, there was something that was important to me that I forgot in the room where I was staying. I chose, I like to use the word choose as much as possible, even for simplistic things. I chose at lunchtime not to go to lunch with other people in there, but to drive back to the motel to get whatever this was and bring it back. Well, that morning I had driven that same route. There was a lot of construction. I knew it. I don't know if I remembered when I was going back or not. Well, I was late coming back from lunch. It just took more time than I realistically estimated. So I did a poor job of estimating the time and whatever. I guess I could have said, let's take an hour and 15 minutes for lunch rather than an hour to try to cover my need for extra time. But I was late coming back and people were milling around in the classroom and there were 2 doors to the classroom. And so I came past this one and I was doing like this, pretending to sneak by. And I came in the back room, and I'm doing like this. And I said, we see you, we see you. What time is it? What time is it? I said, you got me, you got me. And on the spot, I had never done this before. On the spot, I said, okay, gather around. I went and got the flip chart thing here. And I say, tell me all the possible excuses that you think I might give for being late. Well, they were running down the same kind of things that were right here. Blah, 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 blah. Traffic, blah, 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 blah. I said, all right. And then I turned the thing around. I wrote on a piece of paper. And I came back around and I said, all right, here is my comment to you about being late. And I flipped it up and I said, I didn't properly plan my time. Because I knew about the traffic and it was an unrealistic estimate on my part that I could do that on time too. I said, so my apology. And I'll have to think about it. Trying to model and take responsibility for it rather than, oh, the traffic was heavy. It was heavy when I came over. Anywho, that is my wrap up little story about modeling for others to responsible behavior. So Mona,
No, Wendell, no.
officially.
Thank you, Wendell. I appreciate it very much. And looking at behaviors and excuses and blaming and passing it on. The thing of it is that we are sensual beings. We have these senses that are always operating, the things we see, the things we smell, touch, taste. And although they are external, we take them internally. And we have a tendency to not realize that the real gist of life and the real understanding is coming from what is inside of us rather than looking at all the things externally. So in making those excuses, and yet we as human beings still seem to give credence to the things we see, hear, taste, touch, smell. We keep trusting those sensual senses from external, and that can make it. So we have to make sense of it by realizing that what are you thinking about that, what you're seeing externally? What are you doing about what it is you are experiencing externally? So anyway, thank you each one for being here. We're going to stop the recording and then we'll open for some chatter.
All right.